Everyone ignored the Vampire King's son until she asked him to dance. The Crystal Hall of Nightfall Manor was magnificent in a way that made Ilara's breath catch. Chandeliers dripped with what looked like frozen moonlight, casting silver shadows across the marble floor. The walls themselves seemed alive, shifting between deep purple and midnight blue as if breathing with the music. She'd never seen anything like it in her 24 years, but then again, she'd never been to a vampire gathering before. Ilara smoothed down her burgundy gown, feeling suddenly out of place. She was only here because her employer, Lady Thornwood, needed a human companion for propriety's sake. Apparently, even ancient vampire society had rules about appearances at royal functions. Stay close, don't speak unless spoken to, and for heaven's sake don't stare, Lady Thornwood had instructed in the carriage. Lord Casimir doesn't tolerate disrespect, especially not tonight. Lord Casimir, the Vampire King himself. Ilara had heard stories about him since childhood, the immortal ruler who'd held the vampire territories together for 3 centuries, a man who could turn enemies to ash with a glance, whose word was absolute law. She'd expected tonight to be terrifying. Instead, it was lonely. Lady Thornwood had abandoned her within minutes to join a cluster of aristocrats near the wine fountain, leaving Ilara to hover awkwardly by a marble pillar. She watched the vampires dance, their movements too fluid, too perfect to be entirely human. Their laughter tinkled like glass bells, their conversations flowing in languages she couldn't identify. That's when she first noticed the pattern. There was a young man standing near the eastern wall beneath a painting of a blood-red moon. He was tall and slender, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and pale skin that seemed to glow in the dim light. He wore formal attire, a black suit with silver embroidery that marked him as someone important, but he stood completely alone. What struck Ilara wasn't just his solitude, it was the deliberate way people avoided him. A couple dancing nearby would sweep close, then veer away at the last moment. A group of young vampire women walked past him, and Ilara saw one elbow her companion, both turning their heads as if he were invisible. An older gentleman approaching from the left literally changed direction mid-stride when he noticed the young man. The young man himself didn't seem to notice, or perhaps he was too accustomed to it to react. He was watching the dancers with an intensity that suggested he was cataloguing every movement, his fingers tapping against his thigh in a complex rhythm that didn't quite match the music. Every so often he'd tilt his head, as if listening to something no one else could hear. Ilara frowned. She recognized that kind of exclusion. She'd seen it in her own village, the way people treated old Thomas who talked to himself or young Sarah who couldn't look people in the eye. Different meant dangerous to most people, different meant someone to avoid. Her heart ached for him. "Who is that?" she whispered to a passing servant carrying a tray of crystal glasses filled with something dark and wine-like. The servant, a middle-aged human woman, followed her gaze and paled. "That's Prince Adrian, miss, the king's son." "Why is everyone avoiding him?" The woman glanced around nervously. "It's not my place to say, miss, but if you're wise, you'll do the same." She hurried away before Ilara could ask anything else. The king's son. Ilara looked across the ballroom to the raised dais at the far end, where a throne of black stones sat. The man occupying it was impossible to miss. Lord Casimir was watching the crowd with eyes that seemed to catalogue everything. He had sharp, angular features and silver-threaded black hair pulled back from his face. His presence was palpable even from this distance, a weight in the air that made Ilara's instincts scream at her to look away, to make herself small and unnoticeable. He wore black and deep crimson, and his stillness was more unnerving than movement would have been. But as Ilara watched, his gaze drifted to the eastern wall, to his son. For just a moment, the Vampire King's expression shifted. The hardness softened into something that looked almost like pain. He watched Adrian with an intensity that had nothing to do with power and everything to do with helplessness. Then someone approached the throne, an advisor by the look of his formal robes, and the moment passed. Lord Casimir's attention shifted, his face becoming an unreadable mask once more. Ilara looked back at Adrian. He was still standing alone, still tapping that rhythm against his leg. As she watched, he reached up and adjusted his collar 3 times in rapid succession, each movement precise and identical. The music changed to something slower, more haunting, Couples filled the dance floor, swirling in elaborate patterns. Adrian's tapping changed tempo, matching the new rhythm perfectly. His foot began to tap as well, and Ilara realized he was dancing, just not moving from his spot. He wanted to dance. The realization hit her with certainty. He was standing there, alone and avoided, watching others do something he clearly wanted to do himself. Ridiculous, Ilara muttered under her breath. She'd spent her whole life being told to stay in her place, to not make waves, to accept the way things were. Tonight she was already out of place, already invisible to these aristocrats. What did she have to lose? Before she could talk herself out of it, she started walking toward the eastern wall. She was halfway there when she noticed the whispers starting. A woman in a green gown noticed her trajectory and grabbed her companion's arm, both of them watching with wide eyes. An older vampire gentleman actually stopped mid-conversation, his mouth falling open slightly. Ilara kept walking. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure every vampire in the room could hear it, but she didn't stop. Adrian didn't notice her approach. He was focused on the dancers, his lips moving slightly as if counting steps. Up close, she could see his eyes were a striking shade of amber, unusual even for vampires, and there was intelligence there that the crowd's dismissal had completely overlooked. "Excuse me," Ilara said softly. Adrian's entire body went rigid. His tapping stopped. Slowly, he turned his head to look at her, but his gaze fixed somewhere past her left shoulder. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Ilara continued, keeping her voice gentle. "My name is Ilara. I noticed you standing here and I wondered, would you like to dance?" For a long moment, Adrian didn't respond. The whispers around them grew louder. Ilara could feel eyes on her back, dozens of them. Her cheeks burned, but she held her ground. Adrian's fingers began tapping again, faster now. His gaze flickered to her face, then away, then back again. "Dance," he repeated, his voice soft and careful as if testing the word. "Yes, if you'd like to, no pressure if you don't." "I don't," Adrian paused, his brow furrowing. "People don't ask me to dance." "Well, I'm asking." His amber eyes finally met hers for just a second, and Ilara saw surprise there, wonder, and underneath it all fear. "I might not do it right," he said quietly. "I might step on your feet, I might count out loud, I might need to stop." Ilara smiled. "That's okay, I'm not a very good dancer anyway, we'll figure it out together." Adrian's hand was trembling slightly when he extended it toward her, palm up, not quite making contact. "Together," he echoed. Ilara placed her hand gently over his, barely touching. "Together." As they walked toward the dance floor, Ilara could have sworn she heard the entire ballroom inhale in collective shock. But she didn't look at them. She kept her eyes on Adrian, who was taking careful, measured steps, his hand warm beneath hers despite the legendary coldness of vampire skin. Neither of them noticed the vampire king rising slowly from his throne, his ancient eyes fixed on the unprecedented scene before him. Neither of them saw the way his hands gripped the armrests of his throne hard enough to crack the stone. The walk to the dance floor felt like miles, though it couldn't have been more than 20 feet. Ilara was acutely aware of every eye in the crystal hall tracking their movement. The music continued, but she noticed several couples faltering in their steps, distracted by the spectacle of someone actually approaching Prince Adrian, and him accepting. Adrian's hand in hers was warmer than she expected, and she could feel the slight tremor running through his fingers. He was breathing carefully, in for 4 counts, out for 4 counts, and she realized he was using the rhythm to calm himself. When they reached the edge of the dance floor, Adrian stopped abruptly. "There are 17 couples dancing," he said, his voice barely audible. 19 if we join, 19 is prime, I like prime numbers." Ilara smiled, "Then let's make it 19. But Adrian didn't move. His eyes were darting across the dance floor, tracking the movement of the couples. "They're doing the moonlight waltz, 3/4 time, 1 2 3 1 2 3. The pattern repeats every 12 measures with a turn. I've watched it 43 times tonight." "You've been counting." "I always count," he said it simply as fact rather than confession. "Do you know the moonlight waltz?" "No," Ilara admitted. "I know a basic waltz from harvest festivals, but nothing fancy. You'll have to teach me." Adrian's gaze finally snapped to her face, lingering there for a full 2 seconds before shifting away. Teach you. If you want to, or we can just sway and see what happens, there's no wrong way to do this. There are actually many wrong ways, Adrian said, but there was the faintest hint of something in his voice, not quite humor but maybe curiosity. Dancing has very specific rules. Then maybe just teach me one step at a time. Adrian's fingers began that complex tapping pattern against his leg again. He was processing, Ilara realized, working through the situation in his mind. She waited, not rushing him, ignoring the whispers that were growing louder around them. My father is watching, Adrian said suddenly. Ilara glanced toward the dais. Lord Casimir had indeed risen from his throne. He stood perfectly still, his expression unreadable, but his focus was entirely on them. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and Ilara felt the weight of his gaze like a physical thing. She quickly looked away, her heart hammering. Is that bad? She asked quietly. I don't know. Adrian's hand adjusted his collar again, once, twice, 3 times. He watches me at these events, he always watches, but no one ever, he trailed off. No one ever what? Comes close, no one talks to me, no one asks me to dance. Adrian's voice was matter of fact, but Ilara heard the loneliness beneath it. They think I'm broken. The words hit Ilara like a punch to the chest. You're not broken. My mind works differently. Adrian was still watching the dancers, his head tilting slightly. I see patterns where others see chaos. I hear individual instruments when others hear music. I feel fabric textures before I can listen to conversations. My father says I'm unique. The court says I'm defective. I think maybe both are true. I think, Ilara said carefully, that different isn't the same as defective. Adrian finally looked at her again, his amber eyes searching her face with an intensity that made her catch her breath. Why did you ask me to dance, Ilara? She could have given him a polite lie, could have said she was bored or making a political statement or any number of things, but something in his direct gaze demanded honesty. Because you were standing alone, she said simply. Because you looked like you wanted to dance but no one was seeing you, and because I know what it feels like to be invisible. Adrian blinked once slowly. You're not invisible, you're wearing burgundy. It's a 7.5 on the visibility spectrum, dark enough to be sophisticated but red enough to attract attention. 16 people looked at you within the first minute you entered the hall. Despite everything, Ilara laughed, you were counting that too. I count everything. Adrian's lips twitched, not quite a smile but close. It helps, the world is very loud and very bright and very much. Counting makes it manageable. The music shifted, one song ending and another beginning. This one was slower, simpler. Adrian's posture changed slightly, his head tilting as he listened. This one, he said, the Starfall Waltz, it's easier, basic 3-step minimal turns, I could teach you this one. I'd like that. Adrian took a careful step onto the dance floor, drawing Ilara with him. Several nearby couples actually stopped dancing entirely, staring openly now. Ilara heard someone gasp. Someone else whispered something sharp and disapproving. They're staring, Adrian said, his hand tightened slightly on hers. Let them. Ilara positioned herself the way she'd seen the other women do, one hand in Adrian's, the other resting lightly near his shoulder, but not quite touching, sensing he might need that space. You're not touching my shoulder, Adrian observed. The Starfall Waltz requires hand-to-shoulder contact. Is that okay? I didn't want to assume. It's okay, he paused. I don't like unexpected touches, but expected ones are fine. You can touch my shoulder now. Ilara gently placed her hand on his shoulder. Through the fabric of his jacket, she could feel how tense he was, his muscles coiled tight. The pattern is simple, Adrian said, his voice taking on a different quality, more confident, like he was on solid ground now. I step forward with my left foot, you step back with your right, 1 count, then I step to the side, you mirror, 2 count, then I bring my feet together, you do the same, 3 count, then it repeats, 1 2 3 1 2 3. Got it. I'll count out loud for the first few rounds, is that acceptable? Perfectly acceptable. Adrian nodded once, sharp and decisive, then he began, 1. He stepped forward, Ilara stepped back, managing not to stumble. 2. They stepped to the side together. 3. Feet together. 1. Forward again. Adrian's counting was soft but steady, a metronome keeping them on pace. Ilara focused on following his lead, on the simple pattern. She stepped on his foot once on the second rotation and started to apologize, but Adrian just continued counting as if nothing had happened. By the 5th rotation, Ilara was starting to feel the rhythm. By the 8th, she didn't need to think about each step. Adrian's counting grew even softer, almost meditative. "You're doing it," he said between counts. 1, 2, 3, you're dancing, 1, 2, 3. Ilara looked up at him and found him watching her with an expression of pure wonder. Not watching past her or through her, but actually seeing her. "So are you," she said gently. Something in Adrian's face shifted. His shoulders relaxed fractionally. His counting stopped, but they kept dancing, the pattern now internalized. Around them, the other couples had resumed their own dances, though Ilara could still feel curious glances being thrown their way. "I haven't danced with another person in 4 years," Adrian said quietly. "My father used to dance with me when I was younger, in private. He'd let me count out loud and wouldn't get upset when I needed to stop and start again, but at public events," he trailed off. "No one would dance with you. They're afraid of me or of offending me or of my father's reaction if they do it wrong, I'm not sure which." Adrian executed a careful turn, telegraphing it so clearly that Ilara managed to follow. "When I was 18, a young woman asked me to dance. I think it was a dare from her friends. I said yes because I didn't understand. Halfway through, she started laughing. She told me I danced like a broken music box." Rage flared hot in Ilara's chest. "That's cruel." "It's accurate," Adrian's voice was matter of fact. "I do move differently. I process rhythm mathematically rather than emotionally. It makes my dancing precise but not fluid." "I think you dance just fine. You're being kind." "I'm being honest." Ilara squeezed his hand gently. "You warned me you might count out loud and step on my feet. You've counted, which helped me learn, and you haven't stepped on my feet once. Meanwhile, I've stepped on yours at least twice. I'd say you're the better dancer here." Adrian's brow furrowed as if he was trying to solve a complex equation. "You're unusual, Ilara." "So I've been told. I mean it as a compliment." "I know." They danced in comfortable silence for a few more rotations. Ilara found herself relaxing into the rhythm, into the gentle guidance of Adrian's lead. He was right, his movements were precise, mathematical even. But there was something beautiful in that precision, something honest. "Can I ask you something?" Ilara said. "You may ask, I may not answer, but you may ask. Do you like these events, these balls?" Adrian considered the question seriously. "I like the music, I like the patterns of the dances, I like the symmetry of the ballroom. Lady Thornwood hired an excellent architect. I like watching the light reflect off the chandeliers, which are cut crystal and create 17 distinct rainbow patterns on the ceiling. But I don't like the people, too many conversations happening at once, too many expectations I don't understand, too many unwritten rules that everyone assumes I know." He paused. "Tonight is better, though." "Why?" Adrian's amber eyes met hers again, and this time he held her gaze for 3 full seconds. "Because someone finally talked to me, and she's still here." Ilara's heart clenched. "I'm not going anywhere." "People always say that." "I mean it." "How can I know that?" "Because I'm telling you, and I don't lie." Ilara said it firmly with conviction. "If I need to leave, I'll tell you first, I won't just disappear." Adrian processed this, his head tilting slightly. "That's acceptable, thank you for the clarity." The music began to wind down toward its conclusion. Adrian's posture shifted slightly, preparing for the final sequence. "This is the ending phrase," he explained. 4 measures, on the last 3 we turn slowly clockwise, then bow." "I'll follow your lead." They executed the turn, Ilara a bit clumsily, but she managed. When the music ended, Adrian released her hand and bowed with perfect precision. Ilara curtsied in response. The ballroom erupted in polite applause, the customary response to the end of a dance set, but Ilara noticed the quality of it was different, sharper, more surprised. Adrian noticed too. He flinched slightly at the sudden sound, his hand moving toward his collar. "Too loud?" Ilara asked quietly. "Unexpected," Adrian corrected, "but tolerable." He glanced toward the dais. Ilara followed his gaze. Lord Casimir was still standing, still watching. But now his expression had shifted into something Ilara couldn't quite read. His eyes were fixed on his son with an intensity that made her shiver. Then, deliberately, the Vampire King began to descend from the dais. The crowd parted before him like a sea, nobles pressing back against walls and pillars to clear his path. The whispers that had been buzzing around the room died instantly. Even the musicians seemed to falter, the next song starting uncertainly. Lord Casimir was walking directly toward them. Adrian's entire body went rigid. "Father is approaching," he said, his voice tight. "This is either very good or very bad, I can't calculate which." Ilara's heart was racing so fast she felt dizzy. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to get as far from the Vampire King's attention as possible. But she'd promised Adrian she wouldn't just disappear. So she stood her ground, even as the most powerful vampire in existence stopped directly in front of them, his ancient gaze moving from his son to her. When Lord Casimir spoke, his voice was quiet but carried effortlessly across the silent ballroom. "Who are you?" The Vampire King stood before Ilara, and every story she'd ever heard about him suddenly felt very, very real. Up close, Lord Casimir was overwhelming. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with a presence that seemed to take up more space than his physical form should allow. His eyes were dark, nearly black, and ancient in a way that made Ilara feel like an insect being examined under glass. Power radiated from him in waves, and her human instincts screamed at her to bow, to grovel, to make herself small. But he'd asked her a question. "My name is Ilara Thorn, Your Majesty," she managed, her voice surprisingly steady despite the trembling in her hands. She dropped into a curtsy, deeper than the one she'd given Adrian. "I'm Lady Thornwood's companion." "I didn't ask whose companion you were," Lord Casimir said, his tone neutral but with an edge that suggested he wasn't used to having his questions answered incompletely. "I asked who you are." Ilara straightened, her mind racing. What did he want? Her life story, her intentions, an explanation for why a nobody human had dared to approach his son. I'm no one important, Your Majesty. Just a girl from Millbrook who needed work, and Lady Thornwood hired me 6 months ago to." "Father," Adrian's voice cut through her explanation, quiet but firm, "you're frightening her." Lord Casimir's attention shifted to his son, and Ilara saw something flash across his face, surprise maybe, or pride. "I'm simply asking a question, Adrian." "Your simple questions make people's heartbeats increase by an average of 30 beats per minute," Adrian said. His hand was tapping against his leg again, fast and anxious. "Ilara's heart is going very fast, too fast, you need to step back." The Vampire King's eyebrows rose fractionally. Around them, Ilara heard several sharp intakes of breath. No one spoke to Lord Casimir that way, certainly no one told him what to do. But after a moment he took a single step backward. "Better?" he asked Adrian. Adrian tilted his head, listening. "Her heartbeat is slowing, that's better." Lord Casimir's gaze returned to Ilara, and she thought she detected the faintest hint of something softer in his expression. "My apologies, Miss Thorne. I didn't mean to alarm you. I merely wanted to know more about the young woman who accomplished something I've been watching this court fail to do for 22 years. "I didn't accomplish anything, Your Majesty. I just asked Adrian to dance." "Precisely," Lord Casimir glanced at his son. "No one asks Adrian to dance. No one approaches him at all if they can avoid it, yet you did. I'm curious why." Ilara glanced at Adrian, who was watching the exchange with intense focus. She chose her words carefully. "He was standing alone. He looked like he wanted to dance, so I asked. It seemed like the right thing to do." "The right thing," Lord Casimir repeated, as if testing the phrase. "Most of my court would argue that the right thing would be to maintain respectful distance from a prince they don't understand." There was something in his tone, not quite bitterness but close. Ilara realized with a start that the Vampire King wasn't just observing this situation, he was invested in it, personally. Respectful distance looks a lot like loneliness from where I was standing, Your Majesty, Ilara said quietly. The silence that followed was absolute. Ilara heard someone far across the ballroom make a strangled sound. Lady Thornwood was going to kill her for speaking so boldly. But Lord Casimir didn't look angry. Instead, he studied her with an intensity that felt like it reached into her very soul. You're quite perceptive, Miss Thorne, he turned to Adrian. Did you enjoy the dance? Adrian nodded once. Yes, Ilara follows instructions well and doesn't get upset when I count out loud. We did the Starfall waltz, I only had to explain it once. Her retention is excellent. A hint of a smile tugged at Lord Casimir's lips, the first crack in his imposing facade. High praise from my son, he's particular about dancing partners. Dancing requires precision, Adrian said seriously. Most people treat it like a social obligation. They don't pay attention to the music or the mathematical patterns. Ilara pays attention. I had a good teacher, Ilara said, smiling at Adrian. Adrian's gaze flicked to her face and away, but she caught the pleased expression that crossed his features. Lord Casimir watched this exchange with something that looked almost like wonder. Then he did something that made the entire ballroom gasp. He turned to Ilara and bowed, a shallow bow but a bow nonetheless, from a king to a commoner. Thank you, Miss Thorne, he said quietly, for seeing my son. Ilara felt tears prick her eyes. The raw emotion in those simple words was staggering. This ancient, powerful being, who could command armies and topple kingdoms, was thanking her for basic kindness. Anyone would have, she started. But they didn't, Lord Casimir straightened. Everyone in this room saw Adrian standing alone. Everyone chose to look away, except you. He glanced around the ballroom, and his expression hardened into something sharp and cold, which tells me everything I need to know about this court's character. The nobles shifted uncomfortably. A few had the grace to look ashamed. Lord Casimir returned his attention to Adrian. Would you like to dance again? Adrian's hand stilled its tapping with Ilara. If she's willing and you're interested, yes. Adrian looked at Ilara with an expression that was almost hopeful. Would you dance again? I'd be honored, Ilara said honestly. Good. Lord Casimir stepped aside, clearing space for them. Then he raised his voice, addressing the entire ballroom. The musicians will play the Starlight Sonata. My son will dance. And I expect this court to show him the respect he is due, not as a prince but as a person deserving of basic decency. The weight of command in those words was unmistakable. This wasn't a request, it was an order. The musicians scrambled to comply, instruments raising. The opening notes of the Starlight Sonata filled the air, a beautiful flowing melody in three-quarter time. Adrian immediately perked up. This is a good song, more complex than the Starfall waltz. It has a variable tempo in the third movement and requires 6 different turn variations. Do you want to try it? Will you teach me? Ilara asked. Yes, Adrian extended his hand, more confident now. I'll teach you. As they moved back onto the dance floor, Ilara was acutely aware of Lord Casimir's eyes on them. But when she glanced back, she saw he'd returned to the dais. He sat on his throne watching, not with the calculating gaze of a king observing his court, but with the gentle attention of a father watching his son finally be included. The dance began. Adrian was true to his word, carefully explaining each variation before they attempted it. He counted when the tempo shifted, giving Ilara the beat to follow. When she stumbled on a particularly complex turn, he simply paused, reset, and they tried again. Other couples joined them on the floor now, whether out of genuine desire or fear of the king's disapproval. Ilara wasn't sure, but she noticed that they maintained more distance than before, giving Adrian space. They're still avoiding me, Adrian observed, though he didn't sound particularly bothered. But less obviously. Father's command has social weight, they'll comply in his presence. And when he's not present, they'll go back to how things were. Adrian executed a flawless turn, guiding Ilara through it with careful precision. It's fine, I'm used to it. It's not fine, Ilara said firmly. You deserve better. Adrian tilted his head, considering. Deserve is a strange word. It implies that the universe owes us fairness, but the universe is chaos with occasional patterns. Fairness is a human construct. Maybe, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try for it. Trying for fairness in a system designed for conformity is inefficient. Probably, Ilara agreed, but some things are worth being inefficient for. Adrian was quiet for a moment as they moved through the steps. Then, you think I'm worth being inefficient for? I think everyone is worth basic kindness, including you, especially you. Why especially me? Because you've clearly gone without it for too long. Adrian's step faltered just for a moment before he recovered. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. You're the first person outside my father to say something like that to me in, I don't remember how long. Ilara's heart broke a little. Then people haven't been paying attention. They danced through the rest of the Starlight Sonata and then through two more pieces. Adrian's confidence grew with each song. He started anticipating Ilara's questions, explaining turns before she had to ask. He counted less, trusting her to feel the rhythm. By the fourth dance, he was almost smiling. It was during the fifth dance, a lively piece called the Aurora Reel, that things changed. A young vampire lord, emboldened perhaps by wine or stupidity, danced close to them. Too close. Close enough that Ilara could hear him whisper to his partner, "Look at the broken prince playing at normal, how pathetic." His partner giggled. Adrian heard it. Ilara saw him hear it, saw the way his entire body tensed, the way his steps became mechanical instead of fluid. His hand tightened on hers, not painfully but with sudden anxiety. "Adrian," she started. "I need to stop," he said abruptly. "I need to. The music is too loud and there are too many people and I can't." "Okay," Ilara immediately guided him off the dance floor away from the crowd. "Where do you want to go?" "Outside, the terrace. There's a terrace with I need air that isn't full of people breathing." Ilara led him quickly toward the glass doors she'd noticed earlier, leading out to what looked like a balcony. Several nobles watched them go with barely concealed sneers. They burst through the doors into the cool night air. The terrace was mercifully empty, overlooking manicured gardens that glowed silver in the moonlight. Adrian immediately moved to the stone railing, gripping it with both hands. He was breathing hard, too hard, almost hyperventilating. His eyes were squeezed shut. "What do you need?" Ilara asked gently, staying close but not touching. "Quiet," Adrian managed, counting. "I need to count." "Then count. I'm right here." Adrian began counting under his breath. Not in order, Ilara realized he was counting prime numbers. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17. She waited, patient, as he worked through his panic. The night air was cool against her skin, carrying the scent of night-blooming flowers. Inside, the music continued, muffled now through the glass. Gradually, Adrian's breathing slowed. His counting became steadier. After several minutes, he opened his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "You have nothing to apologize for. I ruined the dancing." "You didn't ruin anything. You needed space. That's allowed." Ilara moved to stand beside him at the railing, looking out at the gardens. "That lord who said that, he's an idiot." Adrian let out a sound that might have been a laugh. "He's Lord Wexford's youngest son. His name is Thomas. He has a documented intelligence quotient of 118, which is above average. He's not an idiot. Then he's a smart person saying idiotic things, which is somehow worse." This time Adrian definitely laughed, a soft, surprised sound. Yes, that's accurate." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Adrian spoke again, his voice thoughtful. "You're not afraid of me. Should I be?" "Most humans are afraid of vampires. It's logical. We're stronger, faster, and we sustain ourselves on blood. Fear is a reasonable response." "I'm not most humans." "No," Adrian agreed, "you're not." He turned to look at her fully, his amber eyes catching the moonlight. "You're extraordinary, Ilara Thorne from Millbrook." Ilara felt her cheeks warm. "I'm really not. I'm completely ordinary." Ordinary people don't approach isolated princes at royal balls. Ordinary people don't dance with someone everyone else avoids. Ordinary people don't follow anxious vampires onto terraces and wait patiently while they count prime numbers. Adrian's head tilted. You're either extraordinarily kind or extraordinarily foolish. I haven't determined which yet. Maybe both, Ilara suggested. Maybe both, Adrian echoed, and this time he was definitely smiling. The terrace door opened behind them. They both turned to find Lord Casimir stepping out into the night alone. His expression was carefully neutral, but his eyes were focused on his son with clear concern. Adrian, are you all right? I am now, Adrian said. Too much sensory input, I needed to reset. I saw what happened. Lord Wexford and his son have been dismissed from the gathering. Adrian's eyebrows rose. You banished them. I informed Lord Wexford that anyone who mocks my son is no longer welcome at my court. He and his family have been instructed to leave Nightfall Manor immediately and not return unless they can demonstrate basic civility. Lord Casimir's voice was cold enough to frost the air. I should have done it years ago. Father, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Lord Casimir moved to stand on Adrian's other side, the three of them forming a line at the railing. I've spent too long allowing this court to treat you as less than you are. I told myself I was giving you space, allowing you to find your own way. But I was wrong. I was being a coward. Adrian stared at his father in clear shock. You're never a coward. With armies and politics, perhaps not, but with you, Lord Casimir's ancient face looked suddenly tired. I didn't know how to protect you from their ignorance without smothering you. I didn't know how to help you navigate a world that doesn't understand minds like yours, so I did nothing. And I let you stand alone at these events, watching, hoping someone would finally see you. He turned to Ilara, and then someone did. Ilara suddenly felt like she was intruding on something deeply private. I should go back inside. No, both vampires said simultaneously. Lord Casimir's lips twitched. It seems my son would prefer you stay. I would, Adrian confirmed. Your presence is calming, like finding a pattern in chaos. I believe that's the kindest thing my son has said to anyone in a decade, Lord Casimir observed. Miss Thorne, might I ask you something? Of course, Your Majesty. Why aren't you afraid? And please don't say you are. I can hear your heartbeat. You're calm. Genuinely calm, even in the presence of two vampires on a dark terrace with no witnesses. Why? Ilara considered the question seriously. Because you love your son, she said finally. I saw it when you watched him in the ballroom. I hear it now in your voice. People who love that deeply aren't monsters, no matter what they are. Lord Casimir was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. You see a great deal, Miss Thorne. I pay attention. She does, Adrian agreed. She noticed me when no one else did. Yes, Lord Casimir looked at his son with undisguised affection. She did. The king turned back to the gardens, his expression thoughtful. Adrian, how would you feel about leaving the ball early? I think we've made our point to the court. Adrian's relief was visible. I would like that very much. Then we'll go, but first, Lord Casimir looked at Ilara. Miss Thorne, I find myself in your debt. You've given my son something I couldn't, acceptance from someone with no obligation to offer it. If there's anything you need, anything at all, you need only ask. Ilara shook her head. I don't need anything, Your Majesty. I didn't do anything special. The fact that you believe that makes it all the more remarkable. Lord Casimir smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. Nevertheless, the offer stands, always. He moved toward the door, then paused. I'll give you a moment to say goodbye, he said to Adrian and slipped back inside. Adrian and Ilara stood alone on the terrace. The music from the ballroom drifted out, soft and distant now. Will you be at the next ball? Adrian asked. I don't know. I go where Lady Thornwood needs me. Oh, Adrian's disappointment was clear. His hand started tapping against his leg. That's logical, you have employment obligations. But I could write to you, Ilara offered. If you'd like, I'm not the best letter writer, but I could try. Adrian's head snapped up. You would write to me. If you want me to. I would like that very much. Adrian's smile was brilliant and unguarded. I enjoy correspondence. Letters have clear beginnings and endings. They're much easier than conversations. Then I'll write, Ilara promised, once a week if you'd like. Once a week would be acceptable, preferable even, Adrian paused. Thank you, Ilara, for tonight, for dancing with me, for not leaving when I needed to count prime numbers, for being you. Ilara felt tears prick her eyes again. Thank you for teaching me to dance. You're a quick learner. Adrian extended his hand, formal now, until your first letter then. Ilara took his hand and squeezed gently, until then. She watched him go, disappearing back into the ballroom to find his father. Through the glass, she could see the crowd parting for them as they made their way to the exit, Lord Casimir's hand resting protectively on Adrian's shoulder. Ilara stood alone on the terrace, her heart full of something she couldn't quite name. She'd come to this ball expecting to be invisible, insignificant. Instead, she'd been seen. And more importantly, she'd helped someone else be seen too. The carriage ride back to Thornwood Estate was silent, but not comfortably so. Lady Thornwood sat across from Ilara, her expression unreadable in the darkness. The only sound was the rhythmic clatter of wheels on cobblestone and the occasional snort from the horses. Finally, as they turned onto the long drive leading to the estate, Lady Thornwood spoke. That was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever witnessed. Ilara's stomach dropped. I'm sorry, my lady, I didn't mean to cause trouble. Trouble? Lady Thornwood's laugh was sharp. Girl, you walked up to the prince everyone in vampire society pretends doesn't exist and asked him to dance. Then you spent the evening with him, and survived a direct conversation with Lord Casimir himself. Trouble doesn't begin to cover it. I'll understand if you need to dismiss me. Dismiss you? Lady Thornwood leaned forward, and in the lamplight from the carriage window, Ilara could see she was smiling. My dear, I'm seriously considering giving you a raise. Do you know what happened after you left? Ilara shook her head. Lord Casimir made a proclamation. Anyone in his territories who treats Prince Adrian with anything less than full respect will answer to him personally. He's also mandating that all future court functions include accommodations for different needs, quieter spaces, advanced notice of events, clear communication of expectations. Lady Thornwood sat back looking satisfied. You've inadvertently triggered a social revolution. I just asked him to dance, Ilara said weakly. You showed the Vampire King that his son could be accepted. That's considerably more than just anything. Lady Thornwood studied her. Although I suspect you didn't do it for political reasons. No, my lady. Why did you do it? Ilara thought about the question, the same one everyone kept asking, because he was alone, and no one should have to be alone like that. Lady Thornwood was quiet for a moment. You have a kind heart, Ilara. In our world, that's either going to get you killed or change everything. She smiled. I'm curious to see which. Over the next 3 weeks, Ilara discovered that Lady Thornwood had been right about consequences, though not the kind she'd expected. First came the letter from Adrian, delivered by an official royal courier who looked deeply uncomfortable handing correspondence from a prince to a common human girl. Lady Thornwood's staff whispered about it for days. Ilara opened it in the privacy of her small room, her hands trembling. Dear Ilara, this is my first letter to you. I've written it 4 times because I keep including too many details about irrelevant topics. My father says I should just write naturally, but I'm not certain what that means. I wanted to tell you that the ball was the first one I've enjoyed in 8 years. Usually, I attend for exactly 90 minutes, my father's minimum requirement for public appearances, then retreat to my rooms. This time I stayed for 3 hours and 42 minutes. That's a 144% increase in tolerance. The improvement is directly attributable to you. My father has been different since the ball as well. He's asked me 17 questions about how I experience social events. He's never asked before. I think perhaps he didn't know how, or perhaps he was afraid of the answers. I haven't determined which yet. He's also dismissed 3 court members permanently and put 7 others on probationary status for past treatment of me. I told him it wasn't necessary, but he said it was long overdue. I believe he was correct. Are you well? Is Lady Thornwood treating you fairly? Do you still remember the Starfall waltz? I remember it. I've practiced it alone in my room 6 times, counting out loud because there's no one to disturb. I look forward to your response if you're still willing to write. Respectfully, Adrian Casimir. P.S. My father says I should sign these letters less formally. He suggests warmly or with friendship. I don't understand the difference in warmth between sign-offs, but I'm willing to try. With friendship. Adrian. Ilara found herself smiling through tears. She immediately sat down to write back. Dear Adrian. Your letter was perfect. Please don't change how you write. I like hearing your thoughts, even the detailed ones about irrelevant topics. I'm so glad you enjoyed the ball. I enjoyed it too, much more than I expected to. And yes, I still remember the Starfall waltz. I've been practicing the steps while I work, though I have to do it quietly or the other staff think I'm strange. They already think I'm strange for getting letters from a prince, so perhaps it doesn't matter. I'm doing well. Lady Thornwood has been very kind. She's teaching me about vampire history and customs, which is fascinating. Did you know that the Treaty of Nightfall was signed during a lunar eclipse? Lady Thornwood says that's why all major vampire ceremonies happen at night. It's traditional. I'm glad your father is asking you questions. I think sometimes people don't ask because they're afraid they won't understand the answers, not because they don't care. Please tell me about the irrelevant topics. I want to know what you think about, what you notice, what interests you. Nothing you want to share is irrelevant to me. With friendship. Ilara's. P.S. With friendship feels warmer than respectfully. Your father was right. The letters continued, 1 each week as promised, then 2, then 3. Adrian wrote about everything, the mathematical patterns he found in music, the way moonlight refracted differently through different types of crystal, his observations about court politics. He asked Ilara questions about human traditions, about her childhood, about how she experienced the world. Ilara wrote back with stories from her village, descriptions of seasons changing which fascinated Adrian, who rarely left Nightfall Manor, and her own questions about his life. Through the letters, a friendship developed, genuine and deep. But the outside world was changing too. 6 weeks after the ball, Lady Thornwood came to Ilara's room with a serious expression. You've received another invitation, she said, handing over a cream-coloured envelope with the royal seal, from Lord Casimir himself. Ilara's hands shook as she opened it. Miss Thorne. I'm hosting a private dinner next week, a small gathering, not a formal ball. Adrian has requested your presence. I'm extending a personal invitation. I understand if you're hesitant. I'm aware that my reputation is intimidating, but I give you my word that you'll be safe and welcome in my home. Adrian speaks of you often. He calls you his friend. He has not called anyone that in many years. Whatever you decide, know that my family is grateful for the kindness you've shown my son. Lord Casimir. Are you going to accept? Lady Thornwood asked. Ilara thought about Adrian's letters, about his careful explanations and genuine curiosity, about the way he trusted her with his thoughts. Yes, she said firmly, yes, I am. The dinner was held at Nightfall Manor, in a small dining room that was elegant but not overwhelming. Only 5 people attended: Lord Casimir, Adrian, Ilara, Lady Thornwood and Lord Blackwood, who apparently served as Lord Casimir's closest advisor and oldest friend. Adrian's face lit up when Ilara entered. You came. I said I would, Ilara reminded him gently. People often say things they don't mean. You mean them. I appreciate that consistency. The dinner was surprisingly pleasant. Lord Casimir was less intimidating in this intimate setting, engaging Ilara in conversation about her work with Lady Thornwood. Lord Blackwood was charming and witty, keeping the conversation flowing smoothly. But the best part was watching Adrian. Here in private, he was more relaxed than Ilara had ever seen him. He participated in the conversation, sharing observations and occasionally asking questions. When the topics shifted to things that didn't interest him, he simply sat quietly, and no one pressured him to perform. It was acceptance, real, genuine acceptance. After dinner, Adrian asked if Ilara wanted to see the Manor's library. Lord Casimir nodded permission, and they slipped away while the others continued talking. The library was magnificent, 3 stories of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, with rolling ladders and comfortable reading nooks scattered throughout. Moonlight streamed through tall windows, providing more than enough light for vampire eyes. "It's beautiful," Ilara breathed. "It's my favorite room," Adrian said. "Books are consistent, they don't change their meaning or expect you to read between the lines. The words are just there, clear and direct." He led her to a window seat overlooking the gardens. They sat together, comfortable in each other's presence. "I need to tell you something," Adrian said after a moment. "I've been thinking about it for several weeks, and I've decided to be direct because you appreciate directness." "All right," Ilara said, curious. "You've changed my life," Adrian said simply. "Before the ball, I accepted that I would always be alone at public functions. I accepted that people would avoid me, that I would never have friends outside my father and his inner circle. I accepted that my differences made me unacceptable." "Adrian." "Let me finish, please. I need to say this in order." Adrian's hands were folded carefully in his lap. "You showed me that I was accepting things I shouldn't have accepted. You showed me that the problem wasn't me, it was people who refused to understand. You treated me like a person first and a prince second and different third. No one has ever done that before." Ilara felt tears threatening. "You are a person first, always." "I know that now because you showed me." Adrian turned to face her fully. "You're my first real friend, Ilara. I want you to know that you're important to me, extremely important." "You're important to me too," Ilara said softly. They sat in comfortable silence, looking out at the moonlit gardens. Then Adrian spoke again, his voice quieter. "My father wants to establish a new position at court, an official cultural liaison, someone who helps bridge understanding between different ways of thinking, different communities." He paused. "He wants to offer it to you." Ilara's eyes widened. "What?" "It would mean leaving Lady Thornwood's service. It would mean living here at Nightfall Manor. You'd have a title, an income, and you'd work directly with my father to reform court practices." Adrian's tapping started, anxious. "He asked me to mention it to you first, to see if you'd even be interested before making an official offer." I don't know what to say." "You can say no, that's acceptable. I would be disappointed, but I would understand. You have a life and obligations beyond me." Ilara's mind was racing. Live at Nightfall Manor, work for the Vampire King himself. It was overwhelming, impossible, terrifying. And yet, she thought about Adrian's letters, about the friendship they'd built. She thought about Lord Casimir's quiet gratitude, about the changes already happening in vampire society. She thought about making a real difference instead of just surviving day to day. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Of course," my father said, "to take all the time you need." Adrian looked at her with those striking amber eyes. "But I hope you say yes. I've gotten used to having a friend. I'd like to keep you close if possible." Ilara squeezed his hand. "Whatever I decide, you're not losing my friendship, I promise you that." Adrian squeezed back. "Good, that's the most important thing." They stayed in the library for another hour, talking about books and music and everything and nothing. When it was time to go, Adrian walked Ilara back to the main hall where Lady Thornwood was waiting. Lord Casimir was there too. He gave Ilara a meaningful look but didn't press, simply thanking her for coming. In the carriage, Lady Thornwood smiled knowingly. "He offered you the liaison position, didn't he?" "How did you know?" "Because Casimir asked my permission to offer it 3 days ago. I told him you'd be a fool not to accept." Lady Thornwood's expression grew serious. "But that's my opinion. You need to make your own choice." "What would you do?" "If I were a young woman being offered a chance to change the world," Lady Thornwood laughed, "I'd already be packing my bags." Ilara spent 3 days thinking, weighing her options, considering every angle. Then she wrote 2 letters. The first was to Adrian, telling him about a constellation she'd noticed, asking his opinion on a book Lady Thornwood had recommended. sharing a funny story from the market. She signed it with friendship and anticipation for future adventures. The second was to Lord Casimir. Your Majesty, I accept your offer. When do I start? Respectfully, Ilara Thorned. Part 5 Belonging. 3 months after Ilara accepted the position, Nightfall Manor felt more like home than anywhere she'd ever lived. Her rooms were in the East Wing, with windows overlooking the rose gardens. They were modest by noble standards but luxurious compared to her tiny chamber at Thornwood Estate, a bedroom, a sitting room, and a private study where she could work on her growing correspondence with various courts and communities. The work itself was challenging but rewarding. Lord Casimir had tasked her with developing protocols for making court functions more accessible, establishing communication guidelines for working with neurodivergent individuals, and serving as a liaison between the vampire aristocracy and the human communities under their protection. She'd faced resistance, of course. There were nobles who saw her as an upstart human with no business influencing vampire traditions. There were whispers about her inappropriate closeness to Prince Adrian. There were doubts about whether a common girl could possibly understand the complexities of court politics. But she also had powerful allies. Lord Casimir backed every one of her initiatives without question. Lady Thornwood, now a regular visitor to Nightfall Manor, provided political advice and connections. Lord Blackwood offered his decades of diplomatic experience. And Adrian was simply there, her constant friend, her sounding board, her reminder of why this work mattered. They'd settled into comfortable routines. Every morning, if Adrian was awake, his sleep schedule was erratic. They had breakfast together in the small sunroom off the library. Adrian would share whatever he'd been reading or thinking about. Ilara would discuss her current projects. They'd debate philosophy, trade book recommendations, or simply sit in compatible silence. Twice a week in the evening they danced. Adrian had claimed one of the manor's empty ballrooms as their practice space. He taught Ilara 17 different traditional dances, and she taught him several human folk dances from her village. He still counted sometimes, still needed to pause occasionally, but he never apologized anymore. He didn't need to, Ilara understood. On this particular evening, 6 months after Ilara had first asked Adrian to dance, they were in their usual ballroom. The space was lit by dozens of candles, Adrian's idea. He said electric lights were too harsh, casting flickering shadows across the marble floor. I learned a new one, Adrian announced, looking pleased with himself. The Midnight Waltz. It's traditionally danced at winter solstice celebrations. Very complex. 11 different step variations, and it's in 5/4 time instead of 3/4. 5/4 time, Ilara laughed. You're trying to break my brain, aren't you? I'm trying to expand your capabilities, there's a difference. Adrian extended his hand with a slight smile. He smiled often now, though still reserved. Trust me. Always, Ilara said, taking his hand. The dance was indeed complex, and Ilara stumbled more than once. But Adrian was patient, breaking down each variation into manageable steps, counting her through the unusual timing. By the third run-through, she was starting to feel the rhythm. You're improving rapidly, Adrian observed. Your pattern recognition has increased by approximately 40% since we started these sessions. I have a good teacher. You're a dedicated student, that matters more. Adrian guided her through a particularly tricky turn. I've been thinking about something. What's that? You've been here 6 months now. You've transformed court protocols, established new standards for accessibility, and created meaningful dialogue between vampire and human communities. You're objectively succeeding at your position. Thank you, Ilara said, not sure where this was going. But you've also become integral to my daily life. Adrian's expression grew serious. I structure my days around our breakfast conversations and evening dances. I consult you before making social decisions. I measure my experiences by whether they'll make interesting stories to share with you. Ilara felt her heart speed up. I do the same thing. I know, I can hear your heartbeat increase when I enter a room. It used to increase from fear. Now it increases from something else. Adrian paused mid-step, bringing them to a halt in the center of the ballroom. I've been researching this phenomenon. Researching? I read 17 books on human emotional connections, interviewed my father about his experience with my mother, and spent 43 hours analyzing my own feelings. Adrian's amber eyes met hers directly. He'd been making more eye contact lately, especially with her. I believe I may be experiencing romantic attraction. Ilara's breath caught. Oh. You're not surprised, Adrian observed. Your heartbeat increased, but your breathing pattern suggests you've considered this possibility before. I have, Ilara admitted. Considered it, I mean, but I wasn't sure if you experienced those kinds of feelings. I wasn't sure either. Romantic attraction was never something I thought would apply to me. I don't experience the world the way most people do. I assumed that extended to relationships as well. Adrian's hand was still holding hers, warm and steady. But then you asked me to dance and you kept seeing me, really seeing me, and somewhere in the letters and conversations and shared silences something changed. What changed? I stopped being alone, and I realized I never want to be alone like that again. Specifically, I never want to be without you. Adrian tilted his head, studying her. Is that mutual? Ilara laughed, tears springing to her eyes. Yes, Adrian, that's very mutual. Good, that simplifies things. Adrian's lips quirked up. My father suggested I should approach this topic with more romance, poetry perhaps, or metaphor, but I think you appreciate directness. I do. Then I'll be direct. I'm in love with you, Ilara. It took me some time to identify the emotion, but I'm confident in my conclusion. You're the first person who's made me feel truly understood. You're my favorite part of every day, and if you're amenable, I'd like to explore a romantic relationship with you. It was possibly the most analytical declaration of love in history. It was also the most genuine thing Ilara had ever heard. I'm very amenable, she said softly. I love you too, Adrian. Adrian smiled, a full, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. Excellent, that's excellent. He stood there, clearly unsure what came next. Ilara took pity on him. Most people kiss at this point, she suggested gently. I know, I read about it, but I've never done it before and I'm not certain about the mechanics or whether I'll like the sensory experience. Adrian's honesty was endearing. Would you be offended if we worked up to that, perhaps started with hand-holding and progressed gradually? I would not be offended at all. We'll move at whatever pace feels right for you. For both of us, Adrian corrected. Relationships are bilateral, your comfort matters equally. Then at whatever pace feels right for both of us, Ilara amended. Adrian squeezed her hand. Can we continue dancing? I find I process emotions better when I'm moving. Of course. They resumed the midnight waltz, but something had shifted. The air felt lighter, charged with possibility. Adrian's movements were looser, more confident. Ilara felt like she was floating. They were halfway through the dance when the ballroom door opened. Lord Casimir stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway's dim lighting. I apologize for interrupting, he said, though he didn't sound particularly sorry. But I heard my son laughing, and I wanted to witness this rare phenomenon for myself. Adrian had indeed been laughing. Ilara realized it only when his father pointed it out. Quiet, barely audible laughter, but real. We were dancing, Adrian said, stating the obvious. So I see. Lord Casimir's gaze moved between them and Ilara saw understanding dawn on his face. His expression softened into something warm. You told her. I did, she reciprocates. Does she? Lord Casimir smiled at Ilara. Well, that's the best news I've heard in centuries. Ilara felt her cheeks burn. Your Majesty, I hope this isn't inappropriate. Inappropriate, Lord Casimir laughed. Miss Thorne, Ilara, you've brought my son more happiness than I thought possible. You could never be inappropriate. He grew more serious. But I do need to discuss this with both of you. May I? They moved to the sitting area at the edge of the ballroom, settling into comfortable chairs. Adrian kept hold of Ilara's hand, sitting close enough that their shoulders touched. Lord Casimir observed this with barely concealed pleasure before speaking. Adrian, you're my heir. Eventually, you'll hold significant power and responsibility in our society. Any relationship you enter will be scrutinized, politicized, and judged. He turned to Elara. And you, as a human in a vampire court, already face prejudice and doubt. A romantic relationship with the prince will intensify that considerably. I know, Elara said quietly. I'm not trying to discourage you, quite the opposite, but you both need to understand what you're choosing. Lord Casimir leaned forward. There will be nobles who object to a human being close to the throne. There will be questions about legitimacy, about tradition, about propriety. It won't be easy. Nothing worthwhile is easy, Elara said firmly. Adrian squeezed her hand. We're aware of the complications, Father. I spent 43 hours analyzing them, remember, but I've concluded that Elara is worth whatever challenges arise. Lord Casimir's smile was proud. Then you have my full support, both of you. Anyone who objects will answer to me. You don't have to, Elara started. Yes, I do. You've done more than accept my son. You've helped him accept himself. You've pushed this court toward compassion and understanding. You've made Nightfall Manor feel like a home again instead of a political stronghold. Lord Casimir's voice was rough with emotion. You're family now, Elara. Whether you formally join this family or not, you're already part of it. Elara felt tears streaming down her face. Thank you. No, thank you for seeing Adrian when everyone else looked away, for staying when others would have left, for loving my son exactly as he is. Adrian, looking between his father and Elara, seemed overwhelmed. This is a lot of emotion. It is, Lord Casimir agreed. Do you need a moment? No, I'm managing. Adrian took a careful breath. Actually, I'm more than managing. This is good emotion, intense but good. Then I'll leave you to it. Lord Casimir stood, moving toward the door. He paused at the threshold. Adrian, I'm proud of you more than you know. After he left, Adrian and Elara sat in silence for a moment. That was unexpected, Adrian finally said. Which part? All of it, telling you I love you, you saying it back, my father giving his blessing. 6 months ago, I was standing alone at a ball, assuming that's how my life would always be. Adrian turned to Elara. You've changed everything. We changed it together. Together, Adrian echoed. He shifted closer, tentative. Can I try something? Of course. Slowly, carefully, Adrian put his arm around Elara's shoulders. She leaned into him, resting her head against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, faster than normal but steady. They sat like that for a long time, comfortable in the silence, in the closeness, in each other's presence. Elara, Adrian said eventually. Thank you for asking me to dance. Elara smiled, closing her eyes. Best decision I ever made. 1 year later. The Crystal Hall was once again filled with vampire nobility, the same chandeliers casting the same silver light across the same marble floors. But everything else was different. There were quiet rooms now, clearly marked, for anyone who needed respite from overwhelming stimuli. The invitations included detailed information about the event schedule, dress expectations, and social protocols. Several smaller gatherings happened simultaneously for those who preferred intimate settings to large crowds. And in the center of the main ballroom, Prince Adrian was dancing. Not alone in spirit while isolated by walls of ignorance. Dancing with his partner, with Elara, who wore a gown of deep sapphire that Adrian had specifically requested because he liked how the color looked against her skin. They moved through the steps of the Starfall Waltz, the same dance that had started everything while the court watched, but the watching felt different now, respectful, interested, some were even smiling. Lord Casimir sat on his throne, looking more relaxed than anyone had seen him in decades. Lord Blackwood stood beside him, the two old friends watching the young couple with undisguised satisfaction. You've gone soft, Blackwood observed quietly. I've gone happy, Casimir corrected. There's a difference. On the dance floor, Adrian and Elara completed their waltz. When the music ended, Adrian bowed and Elara curtsied, just as they had that first night. But this time when Adrian straightened, he smiled at the crowd, and this time the applause was genuine. They're actually clapping for him, Blackwood noted with approval. Change is slow, Casimir said, but it's happening. Elara made sure of it. As if summoned by her name, Ilara glanced toward the dais. She caught Lord Casimir's eye and smiled, the same warm, genuine smile that had first caught his attention when she'd approached his isolated son. He nodded to her, a small gesture of acknowledgement and gratitude. On the dance floor, Adrian leaned close to whisper something in Ilara's ear. She laughed, bright and clear, and pulled him toward the refreshment table. "Think he'll propose soon?" Blackwood asked. "He's been carrying the ring for 3 weeks," Casimir said. "He's waiting for the optimal moment. Which, knowing my son, he's probably calculated down to the exact alignment of stars and emotional readiness quotients." "Smart boy." "He is, and he found himself a smart woman who loves him for it." Casimir's expression grew thoughtful. "You know what the remarkable thing is? That night at the ball, everyone saw a kind girl helping an awkward prince, but I saw something different." "What did you see?" "I saw someone finally treating my son like he deserves to be treated, like a person worthy of connection, of friendship, of love. She didn't see a prince or a diagnosis or a social complication. She just saw Adrian," Casimir smiled. "And once she saw him, she made sure everyone else had to see him too." Across the ballroom, Adrian and Ilara were in deep conversation with a group of younger nobles, who seemed genuinely engaged, asking Adrian questions about the music composition and listening to his detailed answers with interest. "The world's changing," Blackwood said. "Because someone chose kindness over comfort," Casimir agreed, "one dance at a time." Epilogue. Years later, when people told the story of Prince Adrian and his human bride, they often focused on the dramatic elements: the grand ball, the powerful vampire king, the social revolution that followed. But Ilara always remembered the smaller moments. Adrian counting prime numbers on a terrace while she waited patiently beside him. The careful way he'd explain dance steps, making sure she understood before moving forward. His first "I love you," delivered with scientific precision and absolute sincerity. The way his hand felt in hers, warm and steady and real. She remembered the morning he proposed, at breakfast, because he said that's when he felt most clear-headed, and he wanted to remember every detail. She remembered their wedding, a blend of vampire tradition and human custom, with Lord Casimir standing proudly as Adrian's best man. She remembered the first time Adrian met her family from Millbrook, how he'd carefully researched human village customs and brought appropriate gifts, how her young nephew had become fascinated with Adrian's counting games. She remembered building a life together, not a perfect life, but a real one, with challenges and joys and everyday moments that mattered more than any grand gesture. But most of all, she remembered that first night when everyone was looking away and she chose to look closer. When she saw a lonely young man who just wanted to dance. And she'd asked. That simple choice had changed both their lives. It had started with one dance, one moment of seeing someone truly, one act of simple, uncomplicated kindness. Sometimes, Ilara thought, that's all it takes to change the world. One dance at a time. Want more heartwarming stories of acceptance, love, and finding where you belong? Subscribe and never miss our next tale.